everybody doing today? I'm Justin Dellinger at the University of Texas at Arlington, the Link Research Lab. And this is Matt Crossland. He's also at UTA with me. So today we are going to give a talk on customizable modality pathway courses. That's a bit of a mouthful, so if you have a better idea for a name after this, make sure to share it with us. We'd love to hear it. So what on earth is a customizable modality pathway? So on the left side over here, you have the learners in a MOOC. And the learners come into a space that I guess Matt coined the neutral zone. It's a place where they can come in, see the different pathways, options that they have, and they can make a selection about which path they want to start on. So in the case of some of the courses that we looked at for our presentation today, we have an instructivist pathway and connectivist pathways. So the instructivist pathways are very teacher-centered, and there's a lot of direct knowledge transfer, where the connectivist pathways are a lot more learner-centered. So what's unique about this framework is the ability to go back and forth within the same competency to be able to get the information that they need to be able to learn and achieve that competency. So you could start off on the connectivist path, and you could move into the instructivist side if you had a gap that you were maybe a little bit confused about something, or vice versa. If you were doing really well on the instructivist side and you wanted to expand on the connectivist side, you can move that way as well and go back and forth throughout that competency. So with the first MOOC that we attempted this in, was called dual layer, and we didn't necessarily like that term, which is why we came up with that customizable modalities pathway, because dual layer connotes a layer. If there's layers, then something's a little bit better than another. So these are equal paths, and there's no path that's better than another. So we identified a couple of learner pathways. Some people could stay on one side only, so you could have fully instructivist, fully connectivist side, in the way that they progress through. Another way could be you could start on one side, move around, and then flow into the other. Or you can take different parts of both as you progress through, as you achieve your competency. So you select the individual bits. Rather than having a linear path, you're being very selective about the elements of the course that you're doing. So two of the MOOCs that we did were the Data Analytics and Learning MOOC, which was in fall 2014. That was George Siemens, Carolyn Rose, Ryan Baker, and Dragan Gasevich were the instructors for that course. This used the dual layer framework, which again we coined the customizable modality design. This course had a visual syllabus where students could come in on a WordPress site and be able to see information and move out from there. That was the closest thing to neutral zone that had. And then and a course metaphor of the matrix and the red pill and blue pill. You can kind of pick your pathway. The edX, we use edX for the instructivist modality, and the ProSolo platform, if you've heard of that one. ProSolo is it's a platform that allows learners to select goals. They can follow others. It's a little bit more it's a bit more of a social and self-regulated platform. Here you go. Sorry. So they also use assignment banks in ProSolo, and again, there wasn't necessarily a true neutral zone. WordPress was the closest thing to it. So in the human MOOC, the instructors for that were Maha Altry and Matt Crossland, Whitney Kilgore, and Patrice. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And that ran last fall, and I'll give a plug because they're going to run it again in November, on November 14th. So be on the lookout for that, and we have a QR code at the end if you have more information. And we did tweet out these slides, so you can see that on the hashtag. So this one also had the customizable modality design, visual syllabus. The course metaphor in this case was the garden or stream. They used Canvas, and then blogs and social media didn't have ProSolo in this one. And then BuddyPress assignment banks, and they used WordPress to have a central neutral zone for students to come into. I also teach 4-credit history courses, fully online courses at UT Arlington. So I'm trying out some of these elements in those courses. So this one is my World Civ class. I co-instruct that with Dr. Kim Brewer. And we are trying different elements of this thing because it's a 4-credit course. The stakes are a little bit higher, and we're trying to figure out things that work well, ways to scaffold in the tools that we have. We don't have a course metaphor. I guess the closest thing we have is a water boy, you can do it kind of thing, because they kind of there are a lot of new tools that we're throwing at them and trying things out. It's a very experimental course, and we're encouraging them and saying, hey, we're going to help you out, and we're going to get through this together. I'm doing research on this to be able to kind of see qualitative research and see what they're doing and their experiences. We are trying Pro Solo in this. We're the first course that Pro Solo is using. That's 4 credit. And also planning the concept of domain in one zone. Students have their own blogs. We're trying to build out that kind of skill set. And we're experimenting with a lot of different scaffolding strategies to kind of see what works in a traditional online class. We can say that now. We have traditional online classes. And I use my WordPress site for sort of the neutral zone where students can come in, have a visual syllabus here, links to Blackboard where we have our instructivist side, and my Twitter hashtag announcements and things like that. So this is sort of the 3 things that we are based on work off. Matt's going to talk a little bit more about the literature now.
All right, and so what we're trying to get at with all this is learner agency, kind of the elusive idea of how do we take these learners that have been told what to do all their lives and what path to follow their lives and get them to a place of learning for themselves, or pedagogy if you're into that. I tend to say allow learner agency, and that's probably not the right word to use. Some people say empower learner agency. Is it really learner agency if I empower it? The word that I thought of yesterday is that we're really trying to get to this really elusive thing of unchaining learner agency, as it's been chained by so many people to try and tell students you have to do things this way if you want to get the grade. So we're trying to figure out a way to open that up without just burying professors and teachers with all these different options in a way that just overwhelms them. So there have been a few papers and projects that have studied this. This is a review of this. Our slides has the full references to these. You can look at these papers. This is what some of those findings have found in the research. The learners do find the choices that are confusing at times. Carolyn Roseanne and her team started working on some social recommendation tools that are helping learners to connect with other learners that may have some answers for them. As you see, scaffolding kind of gets repeated over and over again for self-regulated learning. They need flexible models. The 4th one there is my dissertation. It has all this stuff, as you know, dissertations in more detail than anybody cares. But it's available free online, so if you want to go read it, you can go read it if you can't sleep one night. And then our recent work is finding that learners, they enjoy the personalized pathways, but they need that scaffolding to overcome the technical limitations. So looking at all that research and our work, we have come up with some recommendations for some future research and design. And one of the things we found is that in our first couple of courses, we spent a lot of time describing the pathway design that we just did. But if learners didn't really care, they got bogged down in that. For those that care, they loved it. We got a lot of great feedback for people who really wanted to dig into the design. But for most people who could care less on the differences between instructivism and connectivism and the Matrix and Star Trek and all these different things, they just I just want to learn. So moving forward, we need to figure out a way to decrease the design presence. And that's probably a good idea for any course, is just let's look at the design and how much we're forcing students to learn to design and decrease that presence. I know we always talk about increasing teaching presence and increasing social presence, and that's good. But probably with design presence, we need to start figuring out more ways to decrease that so students don't have to figure out our course structure while they're trying to figure out what we're teaching them at the same time as well. We need to figure out ways to include tools to help learners scaffold from the more structured side that they're used to the more unstructured environments that they're not as used to. And then we need to create tools that help learners map, complete, and analyze their own personalized pathway. And that's why, I've heard several people talk about they've started developing their own tools with the Unhangouts and the different tools have been discussed here. And that's just something that we need to get into doing. Find some people. If you're interested in this, we could use some help in this area because we don't know coding very well. We do a little bit, but it's not that good. So we don't want to make it even worse. Like I said, decrease the design presence. We would not do that. But the thing is, if you think about this, if you could create something like, say, Storify, if you're used to that, where people take their tweets and their blog posts and stuff like that, and allow the learners to map what they want to do in the course when they have all these options. I'm going to blog here, I'm going to tweet here, I'm going to discuss here. And then when they come back on that map, and they can then add in what they did to kind of complete that map, maybe change it, So at the end, they have this pathway. It's almost like a portfolio, but that's a kind of overused buzzword as well, so I don't want to use that. But they have this artifact that shows this is what I did to learn in this class. Here are the tweets, here are the responses, here are the blog posts, here are the videos, and here's this map of what I did. And if we can create that, we can start adding other layers to it, so you can prompt them to ask questions. Why did you make this choice? And they can fill in, so you can even see their thinking process. Why did I make this choice over that choice? Why did I choose to do this? And then even on the underside of that, we could even plug in some learning analytics, some wearables, and some other things like that, and say, students that did this, this, and this also went on to do this. So would you consider doing that? Or on the days that you got 10,000 steps in on your Fitbit, you also were much happier about your work that you did in class. So hey, maybe go for a walk today because you're not sounding very happy, or whatever the case may be. So there are lots of different layers that we can work in: mindfulness, wearables, and stuff like that. If we start getting this map and this process that students are actually thinking about their learning process, but not having to think about the design of the course, but think about their personal learning process, their own personal learning pathways. And then once we start taking this to scale with things like MOOCs, we can get into the problems that were addressed yesterday, and there's a session on underrepresented learners, which was a very good session, and I would encourage you to go back and look at those things, looking at how so many of our learners are in different contexts than we're in, and those different contexts bring in all kinds of different considerations. And there was a gentleman from India that was talking about the difficulties in India. My wife is half Indian, so we've been there and we've seen that. And it's amazing sometimes when you're sitting there watching these two people argue in a store somewhere, and you're asking them, well, what are they arguing about? It's like, well, they speak the same language, but it's different dialects. And it's like, different dialects? Where are they from? Well, he's from here, she's from there. And like, well, that's 200 miles apart from each other. That's like Dallas to Austin. So imagine two people in the same country, they can't even speak to one another because they have such different dialects. Imagine a person born in Austin not being able to discuss with someone born in Dallas. And these are the challenges that we face as we move into a global education realm. And if we can start building a system for students to map their ways through this, then those that are a little bit more self-regulated, are the higher educated ones, can probably get in there and they create a map. And then what if someone could go in there and say, you know what, this person, they live near me, and this is the map way that they created through this content. They found some other YouTube videos that explains the concepts by people in my native language and in my native culture a little bit better. I'm going to follow this map way and maybe, change it a little bit. So obviously the tools we're talking about here would need to be something that they can share and can change. So I think I covered that last point there. So that kind of covers a very fast view of what we're going through. If you're interested in the Human MOOC 2016 that I'm teaching, and others teaching, QR codes there. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.
We actually have 6 minutes for individual questions for this session.
Yes.
So I think that's really interesting, this idea of, as a student goes through a learning experience, there's a tool that automatically archives and storifies this pathway that they went through.
Hopefully be somewhat automatic and somewhat they would interact with it, because you would want their feedback and their reflections on why they chose those things.
Right.
So yeah, but hopefully that it could automate some of the processes and help them.
And is there anything that comes close to that exists right now that you know of, or is this totally completely different from anything that
Theoretically, they could create like a WordPress site and start cataloging links. Storify itself could probably also be used to catalog their tweets, their blogs, and things like that. So yeah, there's lots of ways you could do it yourself. It would just be a little bit more complex and have to put a lot more time into it.
Right.
I think
the automatic part is the part of it.
Oh yeah, I realize like a drag and drop, like literally you could select, I'm going to do this, put it in there, maybe
Yeah.
type something in under it. I'm doing this to your URL or.
That's where we're begging for help. So please help us with that. But yeah.
There's a tool called Grasp. I'm trying to find out who did that. Might be a tool that allows learners in a MOOC to combine things, drag and drop, and maybe do that math that you're talking about. But what I thought about when you presented the pathways is sort of maybe the learners are creating their own PLE within the MOOC, if you will. Is that kind of
Oh, definitely, yeah.
align with your, I like the decrease design and sort of increase the learner design
Yeah.
part perhaps. And so we gotta teach them how to design their own pathways and
It would be part of a PLE for people that kind of already know how to do that, and hopefully a way to scaffold and teach people how to develop their own PLE for those that don't know how. Because that's probably a problem that a lot of people have. They just don't know how to develop it. Oh, sorry.
We have tried in some of our MOOCs to build a kind of board game, which is actually has the path of the whole course. It has worked quite well. It's not fully automatic, but at this moment, what we have is basically a very visual board game where you see like any board game that you have played when you were a child that has a pathway and so on, going through all the steps of a learning process or the pieces of the actual course, and it has worked quite well. So you said that you already have a visual pathway, or you are developing one?
In the specific course or in the
For your courses, yeah.
well, the courses, they always have the instructor pathway already laid out. What the instructor would come in and say, this is, if you did this, take this test, do this paper, then you will finish the class. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that learners have different needs, different contexts, different sociocultural issues and stuff that they need to deal with, and existing areas of knowledge. So that serves as kind of like the baseline to help them, and then they can veer off from that in different directions. And that's what those charts are showing, is learners can follow that path, or they can veer off, or come back, or combine and skip around. So it's kind of giving them the choice to follow the instructor or go their own way, rather than saying you have to follow what the instructor did. Which is not necessarily bad for some learners, but it is bad for other learners. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm using the word bad too much, so shouldn't use the word bad.
So this was very, very interesting and created a lot of thought. So one of the things that I wanted to seek your ideas, the MOOC that I'm currently designing is for adult practitioners between the age of 32 and above. Mostly that's the profile we've got. Now, if we were to implement some of the scaffolding strategies, could you give us some of the ideas that we could keep in mind while
Right.
creating?
Yes. Anything in particular? So for older population,
Older.
yes, because I've taught courses that were geared towards they're trying to get their BSNs in history. So most of them are in their late 20s to 50s. Things that I've found out is, for them in particular as nurses, so they're very procedural in order in their thinking typically. So I try to be very clear and explicit with instructions and stuff like that. That was one thing. I also did just little micro videos also really just helped out a lot. Just literally showing step. That took away like 95% of the questions that I had. No, it's not anything like a completely mind blowing or anything like that, but I mean, those things I found to be very useful in cutting down questions, concerns, anxieties, and just kind of having a very open, hey, we're trying something new. This is, you're not gonna be punished here. We're trying to help you out if you have any questions, like this, and then have very, clear resources and guides and links to those things. And I'm big on redundancy. It's okay that you can have multiple things in multiple places that all kind of, do the same thing just to show that hope. So.
And assignment banks too, something.
Yes. Yeah, that's another thing. Yes, the assignment banks. Yeah, the students in my courses in particular. You guys are using it in the MOOCs. I'm using it in history context. But yeah, the students can work individually. They can work in groups. They can, if they want to create videos, they can do that. If they're doing the Constitutional Convention, they could go and do it from like a reporter angle in the media, or they could go and they could work in a group and they could all record each other having the debates, things like that. As long as they're showing me the different things that they need to learn in terms of objectives, then I'm happy.
The assignment bank is just a bunch of ideas that you give them for. If you're trying to do this assignment, you don't like the ones assigned. Here's some other ideas that would be along the same lines. That's what, especially with adult learners, sometimes want to know is like, I kind of have an idea. Will it be okay? Because they've been taught to do the one thing all the time. And so you have that assignment back there kind of speaks to them that say, hey, here's some other ideas and they're okay. And then they'll start coming out and they'll say, well, I want to tweak this one a little bit. And you say, okay, great, it's up to you to prove to me that you know this. If they're looking for a grade, if they're not looking for a grade, then they can do whatever they want. But you know what I'm saying.
Right. All right. I think time up. Thank you so much, Matt and Justin. And well, while they were setting up, I actually have a quick comment that I think is really interesting, and then they focused not only on capturing learner pathways within the course platforms, they really traced into other relevant platforms such as Prosolo and social media and other areas, other internet real estate. So that's a very good point. All right, all yours.
Okay, so my name is Amy Kwan. I'm a doctoral candidate from UCLA and also a researcher at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And today I'm going to do a very simple look at learning pathways, and I'm using diverse students as an example case. So I've heard a lot of the different talks going on. A lot of people in the audience are saying they don't have a huge staff to look at research, to analyze things all the time. They don't have the programming background. So I thought that it might be good to do a simple version so that people can get started working with data without necessarily having statistical expertise. So to begin with, I just wanted to touch on this idea. So the course I'm looking at is an Intro to Computer Science programming course. And ideally, you would think that most students have some sort of learning ecology. This would be a very, very expert kind of student who has access to all these things. Most of us would not have that. So most of us, maybe you would have something more like that, or something more like that, where the access that you have to resources, online books, mentors, anything like that might just only be online, or maybe you don't have access to anything. So this is the kind of place that I start at when I'm looking at research, is trying to think of where the students are coming from and how you can meet them where they are. So a MOOC is just a part of that system, and I'm not, usually if I'm going to design a course, I'm not going to design it as something that I expect students to focus on solely. Usually it's in connection to other stuff they have going on, other goals, things like that. So it's part of that living system. And for our study, in the course that I'm going to talk about, we have students who had varying levels of programming experience. Some of them were very new, had no experience at all. A lot of them had studied on their own at various levels. Maybe they read a book, or maybe they just used some example code online, or participated in a forum or something like that. Some of them had degrees, even graduate degrees in programming, but they wanted to take this intro course. I don't know why. And some of them had taken some coursework. A lot of those would be university students, so a lot of the popular demographic that you'll have from MOOCs. A lot of them had a varying degree of MOOC experience too. I think this is important in terms of determining the starting point. If a student has never taken a MOOC before, or they've taken tons, there's very different kinds of strategic stuff going on. So for students who have taken 20 or more, a lot of times they have very particular choices they're going to make, and so you have to allow for that. If you have a student who's never taken one before and they get lost, or in particular with the programming course, they had to download an IDE so that they can program, and that was difficult for a lot of students. So you'd have to figure out ways to make sure that they can get on board easily. The last thing that I'm going to touch on is the English proficiency, because we have students from all over the place and from all walks of life, all points of access. This is important. For our particular course, we had a smaller number of students who had basic proficiency, but that isn't to say that any course is going to be like that. And we have varying degrees of low, intermediate, advanced proficiency, things like that. So again, this is what I would take in consideration at the beginning. For this course, I'm looking at clustered variables, so all of those combined. So 88 to 89% of our students that didn't have any subject matter experience also never took a MOOC before. So this is a particular kind of student, and it's a pretty significant chunk. 53 to 56% who had a basic level of English or a low intermediate English proficiency had no subject matter experience. So this is a certain subset that's going to need a little bit more support, and they're going to need a set of pathways that is relevant to them. And at the same time, you're going to have students who have degrees and who want to challenge, so you have to cater to them all. So in order to introduce the course, I just want to mention the major course components. There were video lectures, graded problems, lab tests, and a discussion forum. The graded problems and the lab tests were the only scored items. So for students who are very interested in completion for certificate, they tended to focus more on that. For students who wanted to get the experience and didn't know much about programming, a lot of times they tended to do everything. And when you have students who might struggle more with the language or might struggle more with access, this can be difficult. They would have more of a problem with that load. So this is something to consider. For our course, we had two different structures. Originally, it was offered as a 10-week cohort-based course, so that means that there were deadlines for coursework. It wasn't self-paced or on-demand. The second one was a set of 2 5-week cohort-based, so the same kind of pacing, but there were 2 separate courses, and you could opt to take one and not the other, or take both. It was up to you. And they were basically designed in the same way based on the 4 main components. They kind of, I would say, almost identical, but because they were split into 2, you had some differences. A project would be a bit smaller for the split courses, or the exam would be, split in content. But in terms of comparability, it's pretty close. So the thing I wanted to look at was the kinds of learning pathways that students were choosing to follow, because I feel that it's not so much habit or preference all the time. It's sometimes you choose something because of particular context or circumstances, in addition to your preference and things like that. So I wanted to see how people are navigating through these different pacing structures, different course structures, and slightly different assignments. And then how they're learning to learn. So specifically students who might have more trouble with one component or another, and how they overcome that or change over time. So the patterns. In the 10-week course, we actually had 457 different pathways. And the way that you would define that is just the usual activeness kind of definition if they were doing something. But I based that on the 4 components. So it wasn't just logging in. You had to submit a graded problem, you had to submit a lab, watch a video, or participate in the forum. Those were the activities that accounted for activeness. And the population of the class was either doing everything in a continuous way, so like every single week they would do something, or they would do it incomplete continuous, so they're still sequential, but maybe they start late, or they don't finish everything. And the last group was incomplete non-continuous, so maybe they skip around, or they start late and then just decide they don't want to finish. And that's the smallest group. So then I wanted to look at what the certificate earners do in comparison to the larger population, and it was actually very, very different for this 10-week course. Although we had a pretty significant group of the complete continuous, there was only one person who did that, who got a certificate. So that means that a lot of people spent a lot of time doing a lot of work, and then they didn't earn enough points to earn that certificate. So that points to a potential problem in terms of design that we can fix. And if other people designing courses want to do a very easy kind of analysis, they can just look at things like that and see if there's something wrong. If you expect for people who do every bit of the work to be scoring enough to pass the course and they don't, then you need to look at something. So for the next part of it, I'm looking at the specific clusters of students. So amongst the students without previous experience and basic English proficiency, we had a really small pass rate. And they didn't pass through the second week, which is actually kind of typical for MOOCs, but this is something I want to specifically look at for this group because I want to look at potential challenges that they would specifically have. And the less experienced students with low intermediate English proficiency was the same. So it's around the same numbers, so we can kind of see a pattern. That might have to do with language, it might have to do with course video lectures that are too text heavy. It could have to do with a lot of things like that that we can then weed out and look for. For the 5-week courses, there were only 30 to 31 pathways. So again, if you're designing a course, you want something more manageable, you might look to do something shorter because then there's less variation in terms of what the students are doing. But with that, you have to consider the constraint that that puts on the student. So if they only have a few choices to make, then you have to make sure that those choices they want to make are accommodated. So the population was mostly incomplete continuous, some complete continuous, and then some incomplete again. And the certificate earners were completely complete continuous. You did not earn a certificate unless you did that, except for I think there were like 5 people who had a different pattern. So this also points to a design issue. If we have not a lot of opportunities for people to take different paths to pass the course, this can be a problem as well. Unless for some reason you really need everyone to do every single thing, and that's an objective that's clear from the beginning, then it could be okay. But ordinarily, and I think for a MOOC, you want more options, you want more flexibility. So in terms of that cluster again, we see less experienced and basic to low intermediate student proficiency students not doing as well. They're basically within the opposite of what you would do for completing this course. So something to be aware of. And then I'm looking at, besides the activeness, because that's just a simple thing to start with, I'm looking at the course components. So what path, according to course components, did people take? So these are all the different ones that basically the options that people had taken. So there were only like 15, from none all the way to all of them. And any indication of participation on anyone would put you in that path. But a lot of times you would see change, especially in the 2 5-week courses. If you had a student who did part 1 and completed well, and then they went on to part 2, a lot of times you would see differences in the way that they interacted with the course. And the courses weren't particularly different. But based on their original activity and the outcomes that happened, sometimes that appeared to maybe have an effect on what they would do in the next course. So, for instance, if you have students who are considered more observers, they're watching mostly videos, doing enough graded problems and tests to get by and try to pass, but clearly they're looking more at just like, some would say passively learning, but watching things instead of doing more of the active problem solving. A lot of those students that they passed, they would start doing more problem solving in the second round. If you had people that were the opposite, who in the first round were just doing graded problems only, not watching the videos at all, often either they wouldn't do the second part at all, or they would just continue exactly the same. So if your course is really pushing for completion and pushing them into certain pathways that they must go into, then you might pressure them into doing certain things. So just something to take note of when you're designing a course. And so in addition to looking at paths, I'm also looking at changes within the course, like I said, with the part 1 to part 2, but also in the 10-week course. You would see drop off at like week 7, which is, it's so close to passing. You really don't want people to drop there. But if you see that and you see it in certain clusters of variables, I think it's important to know. Maybe you have students that just can't give the time commitment for that long. Maybe you have something within the course that's making it difficult. Maybe there's not enough connection between the modules so that they can build on what they learned. So these are signs, and it's super simple to just do something like this to focus your energy on looking at something. So in this last part, I'm just showing you what the certificate earners did in terms of the 5-week and the 10-week. Again, with the 5-week course, it was much more constrained. So you could only pass if you did every single module. You could only pass if you did everything. I mean, particularly if you were being technical, you would be able not to watch videos and not to do the form, but nobody who passed did that. Every single person did everything. In the 10-week course, you have these 3, but also some others that allow you to pass. And so, again, if you have students who want more freedom, who have things coming up in their lives, who might have an interest more so in one module than the other, then a longer course in this context was better for them. So, just the main points. The course structure, including duration, pacing, and graded assignment weighting, can have a compromising effect on learners' opportunities for successful completion. I think often we don't think about that, or at least a lot of people I talk to. If you think that a shorter course would be more successful, you'll have more people staying on board and not stopping out. But there are other aspects that come into play. Students are independently making choices regarding which course components to engage with and how much. Therefore, teaching staff and course itself ought to support students in making informed decisions about how they engage. So I think one of the other talks that I attended, they were talking about how groups work and how you have to let people know what they should do and when. That's how you can make a group work well. And I think it just rings true even when you're talking about students who, they have so many opportunities to make choices, and most of the time, if you're by yourself, you kind of just do it on a whim. You don't necessarily think out all of the different reasons, weighing options. But if you provide that information, they would probably be able to do that in a more informed way. And then the final thing, a central piece to offering the right kind of information to students is trying to better understand how they approach the course. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to do it in the simplest way possible. And then scaffolding support, where we can expect students to face significant challenges. So again, just as you would do in formative assessment in the classroom, gathering evidence, finding the learning gap, trying to inform students on how to help themselves, but also try to adjust instruction and adjust resources so that you can give them a better opportunity. We can do the same thing in MOOCs, but I think we might have to just use a little bit more data in terms of numbers. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Now we have 3 minutes for quick questions.
Very interesting study. Thanks for sharing. You mentioned 457 pathways. Maybe I missed that. I wasn't really clear. How did you operationalize pathways in the course? Was it, by sequence in how they went about addressing the 4 components that you have, or, was it? I just couldn't see how did you come 457?
It's basically a sequence. So it's 10 weeks. So each week has its own module. So that's the number. And then you have 4 possible ways to get that number. The graded problem, the lab, the discussion or video. Do any single one of those and you get that number for the week. And then so for a student who did something every single week, they would have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If they missed a week or something like that, they'll skip out. Or if they start late, then their string of numbers will start later.
So you assigned a value to the number of times they accessed something.
Just sort of like they accessed it. If they accessed it once or 100 times, it's still just one number. So it's like they're active in that module.
So in continuation to that question, did you use click-through analysis for that? Or
Yeah.
rather than just seeing the module open and unfinished, right? Just so click-through analysis?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the graded problems in the labs, that's going to be a submission count. And then for video, you have a play count. I think we can use that. And then for form, it's the form comment.
All right, thank you, Amy. We'll have more time for more discussions at the end. Let's invite our third speaker. By the way, I was told not to introduce our speakers, not by my own choice, just to save time, so I'm following exactly the guidelines.
Good job. Take you back.
usual, I have another comment. Actually, it was really interesting in that you look into students' pre-MOOC experience. I didn't think of like, MOOCs have matured in a stage that we're already looking at students' pre-MOOC experience. How many MOOCs did our students take? 1, 2, 3, or 5, 10? Does that make a difference? So it's already not the very new thing, and then that can be a very critical variable into, brought into our discussions or research. All right.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fan Yizhou from Peking University, and this slide is about our project called MOOCs and as an alternative for teacher professional development. And this is preliminary findings, and I really looking forward to get comments and suggestions from you. And we really focus on teacher professional development, and we develop MOOCs for that. And for us, we think a traditional teacher training program like this, learners, they come to one course and they pass or not. And they maybe jump into another course, but they don't have more opportunities to review the same knowledge. But some of these cases, they don't pass this course and don't get the opportunity to do re-exam and repeat. But for MOOC, because it's open online and free, so learners can join the course, and if they pass this course and they use this knowledge learned from this course and they practice means teaching, they will ask for help while teaching. So they go back to this course, they repeat this MOOC, re-enrollment. And some of them can't finish this course because their time is limited, because we all know teachers are very busy. So if we open this course again, they can repeat this course. So we're really interested about re-enrollment in MOOC. So we've defined persistent teacher learners as learners who re-enrolled one course for multiple times. And this is our MOOC called Flipped Classroom Pedagogy, and it's developed by our lab, and we have 7 rounds till now, and we have more than 100,000 learners from China. And we find out of these 100,000 learners, we found more than 16,000 learners are persistent teacher learners who enrolled this course more than 2 times. And this is how many times they enroll this course and how many learners are there. And very interesting, there's 14 learners who keep enroll this. And I really found 2 learners very interesting. They only show 5 or 6 click screen data, but they keep enroll this course. I can feel that they really want to learn this course, but still can't do it. So this is we have a long we have a long list of question sets, and I just want to show some preliminary findings. And first, over 60% learners are female and female teachers, and median age is 35. Most of them have more than 10 years teaching experience, and they are coming from all around China. And why do they return? This is actually first question coming in my mind. And I want to find some feelings from their scores. We use learners who learn 2 times, for example. This is their first time learning score. This is their second time learning score. So 2 scores get a point. Like this point, she got 86 the first time and got 20 the second time. So which means this learner already passed this course, but he keep coming. He don't care about scores anymore. He just do some tests or homework just for more feedbacks maybe. So we found some of them always get very low score. Maybe they just learn Unit 1 or Unit 2, can't learn Unit 3 because they are too busy maybe. And some of them have very low score in the first time and can pass this course in the second time. And some of them already got very high score in the first time, but they can't come. And these guys are those who have got 40 or 50 at the first time, but they can pass at the second time. So that figure is only for 2 times learner, and we look into all persistent teacher learners, and 45% of them didn't have any scores at all, no matter how many times they learn. Mostly because they no-show for this course, like I said. This part is very interesting. We 21%, they already passed this course and they keep registered for this course. And we think this is something special for MOOC used in teacher professional development. So their motivations complicated, and there's no easy answers for this question. But no matter how complicated their motivations, we found their motivation is stronger than non-PTLs. Even though at their first time learning. I just show an example. This is a teacher we interviewed with, and she told us she found this MOOC was perfect match for her teaching, and she really looking forward to learn the for the new materials once we update every Wednesday. So we have 5 modules. We release 1 module every Wednesday morning, and this is the heat map of their behaviors. This is PTL and their first learning, and this is non-PTL. And we can see that for videos, PDF, and discussion, PTLs, they will watch these videos at Wednesday, and they show very strong. And for homeworks and tests, because we have homework, the deadline of homework and test at next Wednesday. Like next Wednesday is this week's deadline. So we see that PTLs, they do homework 2 days before non-PTLs. So they show stronger motivation, and they show some of these self-regulated learning skills. They can arrange their learning and homeworks. And because of that, PTLs have significant higher scores than non-PTLs. So when we then we look into their completion rate. When we talk about completion rate, we don't mean that how many learners complete this course. We also care about, even though you pass this course, how many materials, how many videos you complete watching. So this is feedback from her. She said, even though I passed this course, but I missed some materials, because for Chinese teachers it's pretty difficult to watch some videos taught in English. Then she will keep watching this. This is a figure of all PTLs in their first time, in their first learning. So this part is our teaching material. This part is for extra learning. They don't need to watch that to get points. So these students, these learners, they can finish this course, and some of them count. Every line is 1 learner, and every dot is this learner watched which video. It's from video 1 to video 100. So this is their second time. Same learner. You can find out some learners who can't find time to learn this course, they can complete this course in the second time. And those who already complete this course, they still keep watching the videos. So this is, we put these two figures together and make an overlap. We found out over 53% they can complete this course, and more videos are watched. Okay. This is because we still care about what specific modules or videos they are watching. So this is a picture for their first learning, because this is too small. I put it bigger, and you can find out learners who already watched all these videos. But when they go back to this course, they watch some specific videos like this, right? So we interview with a lot of learners. This is one example. You can read it. Because this teacher said she watched some teachings, observed some teachings, and found some problems. Then she really confused at that moment. So she thought about this. This is mentioned in our MOOC. So she will come back to watch the specific videos to answer the question. So this is a perfect example for this kind of data. So we combine the MOOC data with our interview, and we find the maximum frequency items, and this is theory in our course, like blooms, like arcs, like mastery learning. So these videos, we found many teachers, when they already complete this course, they go back and watch these videos again. And this is really valuable for instructional designs of this MOOC, because we are thinking about whether they don't understand this in their first time, or when they already understand this, but when they use it to write like this, when they use it to write their objects, they don't know how to use it, so they go back. Which means our designers, we need to make this part more clear. Right? And next part is how to do, really, if you use flipped classroom model, how to make videos. Because teachers, if they use flipped classroom model in their daily teaching, they need to make some short videos for students to know. So we found many of them looked at that part, how to use Camtasia. So maybe later on we need to change our course more easy, specific. Okay, that's for most of our conclusions, and we're really looking forward to get suggestions and feedbacks. Questions? Thank you.
Question. So do you change the material each time you offer, or you exactly the same views and materials?
Yeah, we change a little bit. This part, we keep adding things. Yeah, like some wonderful teacher in Beijing or Shanghai, they use flipped classroom, and we find, oh, this may be a wonderful case. So we ask them to show, to make videos for us, and we add it in the course. So teachers, they can, this is mostly changed. But we also change something like, I remember, we made a video like, we call it 7 key points in teaching. But some teachers ask about this, and we make the 7 key points teaching in teaching 1 video to 7. So we make it more detailed.
So you keep most of the material the same?
Yeah, 95% are the same.
How about the homework and
Homework are the same. Homework is for them to design one teaching plan to use for
So
classroom.
that's why some teachers, they did the homework twice. Or
Yeah.
3 times.
Yeah. Very interesting thing is, some teacher already get high score for the homework because the homework is peer review. They keep submitting. They want to know. They want to read more teaching plans, and they want to get more feedbacks from others. So they just come back to this course to submit the homework again. Okay.
Do you keep the archived copies of the earlier courses? So if someone does the course when it's first offered, when it's offered again, is the first one still there for the people that had enrolled? Can they still access?
No. Actually, there's only one way in their mobile phone, in their app. They can. This platform is a Chinese MOOC platform, and they can only watch the old MOOC again in their phone, in their iPhone, mobile phone. In the website, they can't open it again. They need to re-enroll.
Yeah, because we've observed where we have the archived versions of all the courses, so we still have people going back to the course 3 years ago. And watching the videos again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a follow-up question toward yours, because you said that in second iteration, if you want to go back to watch the old videos, you have to go to the mobile platform. I think that might relate to the context in China, that maybe, I don't know, maybe more people have access to mobile phones than even laptops, things like that. Is that considered like easier access for them?
Yes, and for this MOOC platform, they can't download the videos. They can't download the videos. Yeah.
Do we have more questions for this session?
It's very interesting, thank you. Do the peer reviewers of the homework know that the person who's submitting it is submitting it for the first time or the second time?
No.
So it's just getting who's ever on.
Yeah, randomly.
Now gonna get it. Do you think it matters?
Does it matters? I really don't know. Maybe maybe some of these learners will write some comments in their homework. Oh, I find some problems. Maybe I change it a little bit. Maybe they can find it. But I don't think most of them will show that they are persistent learners. Yeah.
There was a really good session yesterday on the intention behavior gap. And your last point in the conclusion here makes me think about that presentation, because I think you're focused on teacher professional development. So I assume that what the teacher learns from the course, how it is being applied in their classroom and how it's impacting their students is probably very important for that next phase. And I wondered if you had thoughts on how to measure not just the learner, pathway, but then what happens in the classroom and how to actually get that information back so you can study the impact of the course on the students.
Yeah, very great question. We do this mostly by interview. We talk with teachers and we ask them, you learn this course, which point you used in your teaching and how is that feedback? And that teacher we interviewed, after she learned this course, she used formative assessment, and the reason why they come back because she wants to design the assessment skills better, and for their students. And we also care about these self-regulated learning skills, whether they can transfer the skills in MOOC to her daily learning or teaching, and even further to get influence for their students. She said when I finished, because this is her first MOOC experience, maybe the only MOOC experience, and then she said, I changed my mind about mobile phones, because in China, many teachers, they don't allow students to bring their mobile phones. After that, she said, okay, we can use mobile phone to learn. Yeah.
All right, so let's invite all of our 4 speakers to sit in front. And I guess the last session could be a general Q&A, and can also be a general discussion among us. So is there any specific comment, general comment, inspired by our speakers you want to share? Please feel free, and please do so. Share with us.
Yeah, so I think this was really interesting, and it's something that where I work, we've kind of thought about with our online trainings, is the pathways, what the different learners already bring to the table and where they want to go. So everybody's pretty much going linearly through the material. And so I think, Amy, you might have mentioned during your talk of like maybe we need to somehow help them decide what path would be. And so, I was just kind of brainstorming in my own head. Maybe we try to say, if you have this background, consider going this way. We kind of know some background of our learners in general, so we could try to maybe give, if you find yourself in this bucket, try doing this. Taking that to then MOOCs, I don't know if there's a thought of how we could maybe use the stuff that we already know, like we know how many MOOCs you've already taken, if they have that survey, or if it's all on the same platform, or just what your thoughts are, how we might break the habit of I'm going to just go through the material and drop out because I'm bored, because I already know this piece, versus choosing the path that's really going to best fit my needs. It's a general comment. I don't know, what the thought is.
I think there's a lot of great work on the technical side to do that with improvised tutoring and things like that. But if you don't have access to that, I think it's great. Like even for something like programming, when they use interdisciplinary examples and things like that, so you can kind of catch people in different ways. And then if maybe they're practicing a skill that they're quite good at, but then they see it in different contexts, maybe they'll see connections to other pieces of the course that you can point out. I like that idea where you can a lot of times people just think week by week it's building in my brain, but I don't necessarily know where the connections are. So you can, explicitly say that these things help you to build to this place that you may or may not want to go to, but it might broaden your idea of what you can do with that knowledge in the future. And I think a lot of people, after they get crazy about taking tons of MOOCs, they start taking stuff just randomly, and if they can connect it, that's awesome.
And I would also just say, I know this sounds really basic, but just get the students talking to each other. Give them that space at the beginning of the course to interact, to introduce themselves to the course, to each other, and just go beyond the whole, hey, introduce yourself, tell us where why you're taking this class, and what your favorite puppy is, or whatever, and get them favorite puppy, well, your favorite pet, whatever. And if they could really start interacting with each other, they can hopefully help each other with some of those questions and get them to a place where they can start asking those questions. And for some students, it may have to be in a less intimidating space that might be a little more asynchronous. Others that may need synchronous. So they might have to have even multiple ways from that even happen. So
I also put a lot of points of reflection in my course where students can go and look and kind of track and see where they were getting in. And kind of say, well, I was this way at the beginning, but by the end I was able to figure this way. I was more interested in this path.
Please. Yeah, I think when Justin and Matt were speaking, there was some of what you were talking about reminded me of this interesting tension that I feel like we often have with the courses that we do at the University of Iowa. Which is, you mentioned, I'm just paraphrasing, this need to decrease the design presence to get out of the way of the students as soon as possible. But there's also this need, because we're very into sort of designing multiple learner pathways, finding, allowing people to make choices based on their experience levels and their goals, and trying to design for what we already know about who's coming in to the degree that we can know it. And so there's this, as you also mentioned, this need to scaffold their unstructured experience to make sure they know how to map multiple pathways, because it's not a traditional learning experience. So you have this difficulty where you need to get out of their way, but you also can't get out of their way. Like I've been on 3 different mid platforms, and every time there's this difficulty of what to do with the homepage. What to do with the sort of initial entry points. And I just wondered if you had any further thoughts about that.
I would reprogram it to where it wasn't so static, and it would just be very dynamic, very flexible, very interactive, just more than just say, welcome to the course. This is what we will be studying for the course. This is what you will do for the first week. And make it something, and if you go back to some of the older Google tools, the Google Pages and stuff, all those tools they killed are actually pretty good, where people could actually customize the stuff to be what they wanted it to be, but still have some of the more interactive stuff. Like I wanted my tweets to come in. I remember it was like Google Pages or Google Home Pages or something. If you wanted to put a little widget there where your tweets were coming in, you could have it there. If you wanted your blog RSS feed, but they killed that. I'm still upset.
Is following on from that. I think it's very hard to work out what you do with learners at the start of the course. We've just done some A/B testing at FutureLearn, which hasn't been reported yet, but just basically we tested whether you put people into a home page first that gives them an outline of the course, or you threw them into the first step of the course. And we found there were substantially more people continued with the course when they were thrown into the first step. So it's not simple, and home pages can just seem intimidating. Because there are too many options, too many things to do. So I think there's a lot of research needed into how do you onboard people with different needs, different backgrounds, different abilities. Some people like to go straight into the course, some people like to be guided through, some people like to have choices, some people like to be told. And it's a very tricky topic of how you keep people going while at the same time you scaffold them.
So this issue of kind of giving the learner the flexibility, changing pacing and choice, it reminds me of what Angela Duckworth was saying also about this idea of challenge and support is what parents can do sometimes. And so one of the things we're grappling with is helping people with enough challenge and deadlines to stick with it, as opposed to this open-ended, you've got a 6-week course and you could do that entire 6 weeks course in 2 weeks, or you actually have to do it each week. So I'm just wondering if you or any others have any experience with those different designs being effective or not effective, where either learners have as much opportunity and there's not a weekly kind of deadline, versus they have just this course that they can access, get it all done in as much or as little time as they have. And how does that impact actual persistence and completion, kind of?
I mean, I don't have a really interesting example, but for the course that they did, the 10-week and the 5, they actually did another set of 5 that was self-paced or on-demand. That course was quite different in terms of the interaction, but not interaction among students. So the paths were different. You had more non-sequential, like non-continuous things. So you'd have clusters of like being active for a couple days and then leaving it for a really long time, but they were able to finish in the end. The problem is there's like so little interactivity in terms of the forum, in terms of even with the TAs and community TAs. So it's a very independent situation.
And did you see differences though in like the people actually completing the course when it was when you could come and go as you want, versus when you had kind of weekly deadlines?
Yeah, I think because they had the direct comparison of the cohort-based 5 and 5, exactly the same content, you had more people completing the whole set. But yeah, it's a different experience. So, yeah.
One more comment. Maybe for this question, we need to look into different types of learners. For us, they are all teachers, so their life walk is very regular. So one round we changed the deadline, like from Wednesday to Friday. So teachers are confused. Why you change? They can develop habit for their learning every week. So if we keep it like that, this is maybe better for them to complete this course.
That's kind of was our theory, that if we give them deadlines that they feel like, I know it's easy not to do it when it's not happening. But we want to be flexible also and give them the space they need.
So in the end, we keep the test flexible to the end of this course, and by the homework, because we need to do peer review, and we keep it every week.
So my question is very general. So when we think about the multiple learning pathways, I think we have assumption that we have to satisfy all kinds of learners. But my question is that is that possible for MOOCs to do that? Because like based on the last speech, we noticed that some teachers, they may use this as a library or as some type of resource. So I think that these kind of multiple pathways brings a lot of preference to MOOCs research and MOOCs practitioners. So I'm just wondering how you guys think about like the goal of MOOCs, or how can we really support members, and do we need to support all kinds of members?
Personally, when I take MOOCs now, I don't really care about completing them. I don't care about certificates, but I really like learning. So I would not like it if they excluded me from doing that. Most of the time when I'm taking a course, it's because I'm doing a project on my own and I need that skill set, or I would like to be around other people who are learning that stuff so that I can, interact with them and we can work together. But yeah, the completion stuff is not so important, I think, for a lot of people. And keeping a pace and with all your life and everything, it's difficult. So I don't think satisfying non-traditional routes is necessarily going to detriment the people who do it the standard way. I think keeping people open, knowing that they're satisfied doing it.
I wanted to quickly respond to that question. I personally don't think the goal is to satisfy all learners. First, it's not feasible, and then we don't have a 1,000-people team to track down every single learner, or learner group, or clusters, or categories, or pathways. There can be hundreds of different ways, but then we still need to look into those pathways. Why? Because we do identify a critical learner group, and then these learner groups are making a real impact, and they need more support from us. And then that's the point where we're gonna get interventions and do some changes. And I really liked the analogy mentioned by Angela Duckworth in the keynote that we offer all those MOOCs, we have all those systematically structured learning materials, free knowledge there. And how can we convince people out there, humankind, come here to take advantage of all the free resources, to do good things in the whole world? And then I like the bring your own container, just grab the knowledge, whether that's a library, a MOOC. How do we motivate people to get their container and then motivate them to get knowledge there? A lot of us as instructors and builders, we put a lot of time in that. And how do we allow people to really take advantage of that? And another thing I have been thinking about as both instructor and MOOC researcher is, sometimes I was thinking about the difference between a single TED video versus a 10-week MOOC course. Sometimes you think about, if Angela Duckworth, you can learn so much just by listening to her 20 minutes TED Talk, a lot of information, versus you have a different choice where she broke down her topics into detailed methods, results, and references into 100 hours of videos. Would you choose the first one or the second one? We're gonna have different answers, but then I feel like I often ask myself, if we're gonna go deeper into tailor-made, on-demand MOOC courses, is it worth it to maybe do a condensed version, TED Talk version for people who just want to check it out? Maybe if we can give them some information just for 20 minutes, even if that is not a systematic course sequence. It's just my open thought there.
I'd say also, when we start talking about, when we start talking about supporting all the learners, we're talking about focusing on what to learn and how to learn it. And so what we're trying to twist the conversation to is focusing on training people how to be learners, and they can figure out the what and how for themselves. They can go figure out what parts they want to do for themselves. And that's a very tricky, difficult place to go, because we have an entire traditional system that wants to put the what and the how for all of us. Even though we're all diverse, it's the same thing for all of us. So it's kind of a mindset change that not only the design, but then all your learners are going to kind of come up and just run headfirst into this new idea, and it's going to be hard and scary for them. So there's a lot that we have to go into about training people how to be learners and not focusing on us to figure out the what and the how.
Do we have any more comments? Yes.
I mean, just to throw another topic on top of this conversation, I think it's really interesting and stimulating to think about then what value are you providing the student and in what context. So for instance, is this student someone who already has a job, has a certification, has a certain academic pedigree, and so they can really sort of just dive in and grab a little bit, and know how to apply it? Or is this someone who actually needs that certificate, and what is our role in providing that value in a context that we may not agree with, that somebody needs a particular certificate defined by an institution we may not agree with? But yeah, I don't know. I just throw that out there to talk about, like, what are we giving our students, and then how do we measure it to see if it actually did apply to meet their outcome?
All right, it's actually perfect noon time for lunch. And thank you so much for joining this session.